Hello,
Hey, hi,
Rohan.
Ashish. Good to see you. And hello,
Good to
everyone.
see you. Means it's good to see you, and we've been communicating over email, but we never talked one to one. And it's so good that we are now talking in platform like Pesa. And thank you so much for being early in your time zone and helping us with this all the question which people have about the loop interview.
No, it's a pleasure. It's a topic that I'm like very passionate about. I'm happy to, be part of this.
Rohan, we will start the session and have question answer. Can you please briefly introduce yourself, what you do in Amazon, how long you've been, and what is your day-to-day work looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I lead a team of partner solution architects here at AWS. We help partners build solutions, competencies, and capabilities on top of AWS. I've been with AWS for 10 years now. I'm coming up 10 years in 15 days. So looking forward to that as well. I started as a solution architect when I joined AWS. So, I've kind of lived this role for many years and now leading this team pretty close to the solution architects that work with both customers and partners.
Makes sense. And yeah, means your badge badge color is going to change. What is it? It will be red now.
It will become red now in few
That's
weeks.
good. So yeah, people who do not know, like people, when we somebody joins in Amazon, we get a blue badge which stays up to 5 years. After 5 years, the badge changes to orange, and after 10 years, it becomes a red. So it is like a proud you are wearing in the terms of badge to being in the company for so long. Thank you so much. And we will quickly jump into question in interest of time. And audience, please keep your questions coming, and we will try to address as much as we can. Now, Rohan, one very basic question that why we call it a loop interview? What is a loop here?
So I think it's pretty interesting, right? Different companies have different hiring practices. So in Amazon, it's called a loop interview. It's typically 4 to 6 interviews. It used to happen on site over a day, right? Back to back interviews. But since COVID, we've started doing it virtually, and now we're coming back to doing these interviews on site, right? So it's those interviews back to back with different folks, different interviewers, part like the hiring manager is there, the bar raiser is there, and few other like peers would also be there. And then post that there'll be a debrief, and then we kind of close the loop by giving the feedback to the candidate, right? So that just a terminology we use internally, and that's why it's called a loop.
So yeah, means that's the next question that okay, I talk to different people and I'm hoping in that I would be talking to direct business owners or direct people who I would be working with and somebody else also on the team. What
Exactly.
happens after loop interview? I did 5 hours of interviewing. What happens afterwards? What is debrief?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, right? So every interviewer, who talks to the candidate ends up, putting a bunch of interview summaries and notes in a system. It's an internal system where they add all the observation, insights, things that they kind of took away from the interview, and then add a vote, right? Whether they're inclined to hire the candidate or they're not inclined. And once everyone submits the vote, then we get into a process called debrief. It's where all the interviews come together on a call, and they read each other's interview summaries and notes to understand, and the votes as well, to understand holistically how the interview process is. And as an interviewer, you get data points and inputs just by your 1 hour of conversation. But now, after having 4 to 6 hours of conversation, you get like much more data points. So you absorb all that, and then there is a discussion that follows, right? Whether the candidate should be hired or not, right? And the bar raiser runs the loop and runs the debrief. And the outcome of that debrief, after the discussion, there's another final vote that happens, and then the higher no higher decision is made. So that's typically how the debrief process runs. And there's one thing I want to also call out here, right? The way kind of we do interviews is not just to understand if the candidate can do the job that they are being interviewing for. Obviously that's critical, but that's not the only thing. right? We also look at whether the candidate fits into the Amazonian culture, and the leadership principles are important as well. And then also we are making a decision for a long term hire, right? So we're not kind of thinking about hiring somebody just for like that team or that role, but we hire for Amazon. So some of these aspects also play an important part in the hiring process, and it's not just the functional skill set or the technical skill set in case of a solution architect or a technical role that's only considered during the hiring process.
Yeah, and should I say that the loop interview only focuses on behavioral stuff, or there is a technical stuff too?
It's a mix of both, right?
Mix
So
of both.
every interviewer who comes to interview has got certain competencies that they evaluate. The competencies is a combination of some leadership principles as well as some technical competencies, right? Like if you're an architect, we look for technical breadth and depth. We look for experience of like being a trusted advisor for customers, right? We look at previous hands-on experience. That's super critical. So there are different aspects that we look at from a technical standpoint as well.
Hmm. Makes sense. That's nicely summarized. And then when it focus purely on the leadership skills, so what could be the best way a candidate can showcase that, hey, I'm living with these leadership skills, or I have embodied these skills?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. See, typically the behavioral questions are based on your past experiences, right? So the interviewer is going to ask you about like fairly open-ended questions, right? Like, hey, tell me about a time when got some critical feedback from a customer about a product, and what did you do about it, right? Like, so there'll be very generic, open-ended questions, and the idea from an interviewer standpoint is to understand how did you kind of react and address, and how did you acted on some of these situations that happened in your past career. And what they will try to take away from it is how those kind of exhibited the leadership principles that we are looking for, right? So they are not something that you prepare for like an exam or anything, right? It just you need to come to the interviewer prepared to share some of the past projects and past like situational examples and behavioral examples where you can highlight a lot of leadership principles, right? Like that's how the interview process typically happens.
Makes sense, makes sense. And most of the time we answer things in story format, right? So
Right.
question comes that should I have like 12 leadership principle into two stories for each, like 24 stories, or can I reuse my stories and frame them in a manner which
Yeah.
aligns to that specific principle which is being asked?
Yeah, I mean, see, my advice to candidates who are, interviewing or preparing for an interview is like, sometimes it's not very useful to be over prepared, right? So my advice always is, hey, write down a few strong examples, right, of projects that you have done, of some kind of really critical situations that you have faced, and how you have kind of addressed those situations. And don't think from, oh, I have to write an example for a leadership principle, or prepare for a leadership principle. I would rather kind of change the thinking there and say, hey, just write down examples of like what you have like done and based on your experience. And then when the question comes, you'll realize, hey, this example that I've prepared
Hmm.
for is the right example, and then just share that. That way you're much more authentic in your
Exactly.
responses, and you don't come across like over prepared, right? And now coming to the question, Ashish, you asked is reusing stories. I mean, see, there's no hard and fast rule. You can reuse stories, but don't use the same story for every interview. You also want to showcase the breadth of your experience,
Exactly.
right? So in order to showcase the breadth, you might want to give different examples to different interviewers, because like I said, in the debrief, everybody's going to read
Yeah.
everybody else's interview. So if it's the same story across like 5 or 6 interviews, then you're not representing yourself well by showcasing that, hey, you have a broad set of experience and not just a single project, right? So I would, if it makes sense, reuse it, use your judgment, but don't like reuse it, don't overdo it, right?
I agree on that. And maybe I'm taking a question from AK which goes back to debrief. What happens if one says no and one says yes to hire? Inclined, not inclined. Is there a
Yes.
debate happening, or who gets their veto power? Bar raiser?
So, see, everybody comes in very open-minded, right? For
Mhm,
the debrief, and obviously there is a training that happens before even you can interview, right? So, all Amazonians who are doing interviews have undergone certain trainings on how the hiring process works and so on. So, when you come in the debrief, more often than not, it is the votes are not always everybody's inclined or everybody's not inclined, right? It is always a combination of some folks are
mhm,
inclined, some folks are not inclined, and that's a good thing. That's where the candidate has really represented themselves well, and this is where the debrief then kind of starts kind of peeling the onion, so to say, to understand, hey, why is somebody saying no, right? What were their reasons, right?
mhm,
Are those coachable reasons, or are those like something which are so ingrained that it's difficult to change it, right? Or is it something you can address with training? Is it something that you'll get with experience? So it's a very open-minded discussion about how you address that. And from a bar raiser standpoint, they are the ones who are running this debrief, so they look into things as, hey, whether some of this are really a big blocker for hiring, or some of these are just like something that you can coach and kind of learn. The end result of the debrief, right, if it's inclined,
mhm.
is still that the hiring manager gets some input saying, hey, these are some of the things you want to do when the candidate onboards, on how to coach them and help them become successful, right? So it's like typically you have like performance reviews in your companies, and you get that feedback of, hey, these are things you did well, these are the things you need to growth ideas and things you need to grow on. Those kind of inputs are given to the hiring manager, right? So that's how the db process works. It's a pretty cohesive and process where everyone has a voice and a weight. So I wouldn't say there is one person who can really swing the decision, right? Obviously, being the bar raiser, they have a kind of a veto power, like you said, Ashish. But like, see, I've been a bar raiser for 4 years. I've never used a veto power, right? Because
Exactly.
everybody is open to feedback and open to changing their views, right? And this is exactly how the process should work.
Makes sense. And like probably this is a question which people may have in mind. Sunil is asking, if in loop interview a candidate is not able to perform well in starting 2, 3 interviews, then also he will be allowed to appear in the remaining interviews.
Oh yeah, absolutely, right. Because
Yeah.
these interviews are very independent, right? So again, the idea behind doing these interviews is that we want to have different people diverse opinions
Mhm.
about the candidate. So we try to remove the bias out of this, right? So there could be one interview with the candidate did not do well, and we see that a lot, right? Like when you entering a loop, the first interview you're a little nervous as a candidate, and sometimes you're not
Yeah.
kind of really, you don't typically end up doing well in the first, right? Like, at least personally, I've like had that experience when I was interviewing. But then when you get to the second, you're like a little used to it, you start doing better. By the time you get to the third, you're like really giving strong examples, right? So like treat each interview as a fresh interview, as they
Mhm.
say in sports, right? Like, forget the past moment, like look at the next moment, like think of the interviews like that. Like, start fresh, do your best, and then when the debrief happens, all these factors would get considered, right? And then I've seen many debriefs where somebody says, hey, I was the first interview, so I didn't like really get a lot of good inputs, but seeing
Mhm.
everybody else's feedback, I'm ready to change my vote, right? I was not inclined beginning, but I'm now inclined, because I think, because mine was the first interview, the candidate was a little nervous, right? So these factors, also human factors, also play a pretty
Exactly.
important role in the debrief.
And it's a very easy to when it's very common to get nervous in interview. However well
Yes,
you prepared are, interview is
yes,
an interview. And when the
exactly.
stakes are high, like joining AWS or not, and probably you would have butterflies in your stomach. It's completely normal to have. So yeah, that's why the biases are removed by multiple interview rounds and all. But that's a good one. And so Rohan, what is the time frame we respond back to candidate after the loop interview? Is it 5 days?
Yeah, typically it's 5 days. In I think more than 90-95% of the interviews we get back to the candidate in 5-6 days. There are sometimes cases where somebody's going on PTO, so you can't do the debrief within 5 days, or there's some critical customer engagement. So there are a few cases where it gets delayed, but I think for most part, our recruitment team and talent team is pretty good at scheduling the debrief within, like 2 to 5 days after the
Makes
interviews have been conducted.
makes sense. Okay, great. And then there's a question like, can a candidate be offered a higher or lower position based on the interview performance?
Oh,
Does it
absolutely.
happen?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it happens more often than you think,
Oh,
like, and it's not just always about, like you said, like getting a lower position. It's also, I've been in many interviews where you're interviewing for one level and the candidate did really well. So you said, hey, if you bring this candidate at this level, probably you're doing a disservice to the candidate and Amazon as well. You should rather hire the candidate at a higher level, right? And the other scenario is also kind of that. So again, just because you're starting at a level for an interview doesn't mean you'll end up at that same level.
that's a good one. Yeah, means it's a fair thing, right? Isn't it, for candidates too and for Amazon too? So that makes sense, completely makes sense. Now I want to take one question on star format, which is like well known thing about Amazon interviews. So how we can effectively use star method, and if you can give an example of like, hey, if there's a question like this, what I could have done to give a format and answer in a star format.
Yeah. Uh, so firstly, I'll say, see, using the star format is really important, right? For somebody uh, on in the interview, right? And the reason being, see, you might be very close to the project or very close to the experience that you had, but when you're talking about that experience to somebody who's never heard it, might not even associate with some of those things, it's important to break that down, in a star format for somebody to understand, and then kind of get the right takeaways from it, right? So stars really important. For people who don't know what star is, star stands for situational, task, actions, and results. And I'll give you an example. So let's say if you get asked a question, hey, tell me when you had an operational issue or operational event and there was an outage for a customer, how did you help that customer, right? So if that's a question that you get asked, then you should start with the situation, right? In this case, the situation could be, yeah, I was working with the e-commerce customer who had a outage for the e-commerce side during a peak sale event, right? And the customer sentiments were bad, and like users were getting errors, and as a result there was revenue loss, right? And the customer thought, hey, it is a server capacity issue, so they thought they would add more servers to mitigate the capacity, but it was going to increase the infrastructure cost if they do. So this is the situation, and then you need to kind of talk about the task you had in hand, right? So as task as an architect, for this customer, my job was to make sure that I find the right architecture solutions to this problem, and also prevent this problem from occurring in the future, right? And then the actions you take, right, is very important, and this is where you have to really kind of showcase the work that you do and get to a level of details, in my opinion. So you can talk about, hey, so when I first got this feedback, I went and tried to analyze the bottlenecks. So for that, I analyzed the cloud trail logs. I looked at the x-ray x-ray configurations and the logs. I looked at the load balancing configuration. I looked at the auto scaling configurations. I looked at the database query performance, right? So these are the things I kind of looked at, and then I realized that there were two key bottlenecks, right? One was there was a subsystem which was a monolith, and it required high time to scale up and down, and the database queries were, a few of those database queries were not really performant, and they were taking a lot of time. That was creating a load, and that's what the connections were dropping, right? So then I came up with a short term solution and long term solution. The short term solution was to change the scaling parameters, or create read replicas for databases to try out some of the queries to reduce the connection errors. But the long-term solution was, for me, I recommended the customers to break down that subsystem and make it serverless.
Mm,
And also on the database side, redesign some of the queries to improve the performance. So in the first month, we implemented the short-term fixes to provide customer with high availability in the you know um, in the short term. But over the next 3 months, we re-architected the system. I worked with the DevOps team to test it and do the necessary load testing, and then eventually it was pushed to production. So these are all the actions you took, and then the result, again, try to quantify result with data. Like in this
mm,
case, you can say, hey, after that we realized that the performance, even with 5x the load, was the same, right? Or database query performance reduced by almost 60%, right? So these are some of the results. And then it's been like 2 years since we, had that fix in production, and we didn't have an outage because of those particular issues, right? So these are the results you share. So this, as I share this example, you'll see it's simple for anybody who's not been in that situation, not being a solution architect, also
not been
able to
yeah.
understand. And that's why the star format is, so hope, Ashish, that helps. you know
That's a great example. I mean, that's a very common example, and the way you broke it down, it really will help a lot of people in passing these interviews. I'm sure on that. Now, there we can prepare well, Rohan, for everything, and but there would be still question in interview which I have no clue about
yes.
how I should be going about it. So if a candidate is handling a question which is unfamiliar topic or technology, what he or she should be doing.
Yeah, and that happens more often than not in technical interviews, right? You will not come across every technology or every scenario, right? So firstly, I would say, be honest and authentic, right? Many times, if you don't know something, just say you don't know. That's okay. Okay, you're not expected to know everything. So
Yeah.
somebody asked me a question about, hey, tell me about how does like encryption work in a certain service or a certain storage technology, and I've never kind of done that. I'll say, hey, I don't know that, but here's how I would, if I get that question from a customer, here's how I would proceed, right? I'll go look at the AWS documentation. I'll quickly use my internal AWS account to kind of do a POC and a pilot, then talk to a couple of experts. And this is how I will respond, right? So again, what you're showing here is two things. One is you're being honest that you don't know something, and then you're
Mm,
showing the ability to find the answer.
find the answer.
That is more important as an essay, right? It's not about you knowing anything, but yeah, what do you do to find the answer or to gain the right expertise to be able to address that situation, right? And if that you're able to showcase, then that's a big plus, for you as a candidate, because now you're showing the right behavior, right? So that's how I would recommend kind of addressing anything that you don't know or you're not familiar with.
Makes sense. And what you have seen in your tenure, that what are the common mistakes candidate make? Could be intentionally, unintentionally. Intentionally, obviously, no one would do it, but it
Yes.
happens like I'm nervous or I'm not feeling well or whatever. So what could be the
Yeah.
common mistakes which you have seen?
So I would give like few recommendations, right? More best practice
Hmm.
and what to avoid. Firstly, be prepared, right? You might be a very well experienced solution architect, but still kind of treat the interview, be prepared. Uh, like I recommend people to write down some strong, examples from their experience and projects, so that just when the question comes, you are able to articulate in a crisp manner. Secondly, those examples need to have the right data, and many times you forget, right, like what you've done 3 years back. So it's good to write them down, and being prepared is probably the most important step, right? Is The other thing is, don't be over prepared. Okay. And what I mean by over prepared is, see, you need to also read through the Amazon leadership principles, because that's a critical, competency area for your interviews. And your examples need to bring that out, right? But I've also seen candidates who try to do kind of leadership principle name dropping. I think I was customer obsessed here, right? And that kind of comes across a little bit unauthentic sometimes. So
Agree.
don't be over prepared, and don't say the words because you think those words would mean something, but rather be very authentic in your example. So that's one kind of general thing. Like I said, be honest. If you don't know something, say you don't know something, but like also share, hey, this is how I would find the answer, or give an example. Hey, in the past, like, I got this question, I didn't know about it, and this is how I found it. So that's another way of like preparing. The other thing also, which I've seen, is not using star formats. You're a little bit all over the place, and it's hard for
Mhm.
somebody to understand like your thinking or how you've kind of addressed that situation. So try to practice the star format before you go to interviews. That's the another kind of best practice I would kind of share with the people. So if you're prepared to do this, if you do all these, then I think you'll have a good kind of interview.
Makes sense. And maybe this is a question which is like, should I be asking about the option, or like how did I perform? Will there would be an answer given to me in the interview? Like somebody would tell me I did well or no? I think no, right?
No, you won't get a lot of details, right? Because obviously some of it is considered like confidential information, but you'll get some high level like feedback, right? And again, there are many factors that can kind of result in a not inclined outcome. But typically, you don't get a lot of details.
Makes sense. And now I'm picking up a question which is very, very specific to the org you led. That what is the difference between a solution architect and a partner solution architect?
Yeah, I mean, see, there are different solution architect roles in AWS, right? So the three roles, I can talk about is, there are solution architects who manage customer accounts. Then there are
Hmm.
solution architects who are specialized in certain technology or industry. And then third solution architect is solution architects who manage partner accounts, right? So I work with, partners like Salesforce or Databricks or ServiceNow or Accenture or TCS, right? These are all AWS partners, part of the AWS partner network. So I work with those partner accounts. And the role is no different. It's managing an external kind of account, whether it's a partner or a customer or a technology area if you're a specialist, or a industry if you're an industry SA. So those are different type of solution architect roles, that you'll see in AWS.
Makes sense. And it was really insightful discussion, Rohan, and thanks for being here on Saturday. I know it's a very busy schedule for you and being an odd
Not at
time,
all.
but yeah,
It's my
thank
pleasure.
you so much. Means it was so nice to talk to you all, and very authentic and very, very um, unique understanding of the role and how things. So people would be obviously be getting benefited from it. With that note, we hope to speak you in some other sessions on, and thank you so much. For the
Definitely.
participant who are just joining us or listening it afterward, feel free to share more questions. We would have expert who would be able to answer question, and any feedback you have for the session you have seen about Q and this loop interviews and all, let us know so that we can improve the content and give you the best from the time you are investing here. Thank you so much. As a last step, Marco has sharing a slide, so I'll add that. So complete the workshop link, we'll share it into email. Share your learning in the LinkedIn group, and then help others in Discord channel so that they can also prepare for the workshops or interviews, and you could spread the word about BESA program. And do not forget to provide feedback or ask question into the comment. Thank you, Rohan, and we will hope to see you in some other session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ashish.
Thanks, everyone.